Alright everyone, we start off today with fairly big news, which is that the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals has actually ruled that the SEC's internal judiciary system is unconstitutional. What it is, that's the Securities and Exchange Commission, and it's executive in nature. What happened is that Congress formed the capability of the SEC, and by the way other groups, to adjudicate cases within their own agencies. So the idea is that an SEC-appointed judge will be the one actually deciding your case if the SEC decides that you're guilty of exchange fraud or something. What the Fifth Circuit has held is that this is an unconstitutional attempt by Congress to create an alternate judiciary violating the Seventh Amendment. The right to an actual fair trial is deprived of a person because of, number one, the embedded potential for bias within the agency. They got their job at the behest of the agency that's now being defended against or sued. That can create potentially a lopsided issue. And it actually reminded me of something else, which is the internal system that's used for like FISA applications and stuff. We have a bunch of secretive, shadowy, executive-run courts in the country through various agencies that have policing power, that have civil power, the ability to sue people, and then effectively decide their own cases internally. And the person has been, up until now I suppose, incapable of really mounting any meaningful defense because the agency is the judge, jury, and executioner in these cases. We see a big example of this with the Russiagate hoax. Certainly with the FBI agents fronting fake material to the FISA court where it gets rubber stamped, it's about a 99% success rate that they get these warrants actually signed off on. In that case, the deputy head, Rosenstein himself, swore under oath that he couldn't remember whether he even read the document before rubber stamping it himself after it was fronted through the court system to him. It's a dysfunctional system. It quite clearly is unconstitutional. I wouldn't debate that in the least. Now, before I get into this, there will be a pinned comment down below if you're watching this video on YouTube. Instead of putting links to the video hosting sites that I use for other material, though, exclusives every day, everyone already knows that, I think, keep in mind there will be a link to actually my debate the other day with Richard Spencer. I think this was my second favorite debate of all time, coming in just shy of the one that I had with Anomaly. That one was a total hoot. This was a really fun debate, and a second link to the straw poll actually about who won the debate. It's fair game to do this because I know like Spencer and people that like him, they'll share it out, so why the hell can't I? This is the way that polls operate online. They're not exactly scientific in nature. So that one's on straw poll, so you don't need a Twitter account or anything. Now, my hope, the government will appeal this, that much is clear. My hope is it goes before SCOTUS and they do a broad ruling. And considering the composition of the court, it's possible that this will happen. Keep in mind that some of the conservative justices may be aboard with the basic premise of the ability of government agencies to create a parallel and unconstitutional judiciary body. I don't know that they'll have 5 votes in total. In fact, you could see one of the left-wing justices come out actually against the SEC in a final decision. Now, they could do this in a narrow decision. They could say, well, the SEC in the specific way in which it was conceived of, under the auspices of Congress, they can't do that. These cases have to be actually adjudicated by a proper public court of law, one in which there is proper cross-examination, one in which the judge is not appointed by the same agency involved in the legal struggle from the get-go. My hope, though, is they go more broad. It's sort of like looking at the Roe v. Wade decision. The SCOTUS it has narrowed down apparently to 2 choices. They can go broad and strike down Roe v. Wade entirely, which appears to be what will happen. They could also do like what Roberts appears to want to do, which is ignore the Roe issue and not strike it down, but uphold the Mississippi 8-week abortion ban, therefore considerably watering down federal level, or judiciary rather, protections of abortion. That'd be a narrow ruling. Roe still is there. It's just a matter of having future cases in which you determine what the final cutoff is that would violate the auspices of that prior decision. I'm hoping they go broad. And normally I don't hope that the SCOTUS goes broad. I hope that they strike down the ability of the executive and legislative branches of government to meddle in the trial process for civil or criminal purposes cross-agency in every way, shape, or form, because it quite clearly and explicitly violates the Constitution when the actual judge in the case is associated with the potential plaintiff or defendant. In a normal public court, if this is the case, judges are asked to recuse themselves. These individuals are being put there by the person you're suing. There's totally no legal conflict of interest there, and there are actually two cases separately moving forward towards SCOTUS on this issue. A link in the description as well, archived of course. You can read about this story. I'm seeing very little mention of this. I mean, I saw this on 4chan, another use for 4chan. Excellent news aggregator, by the way, Richard, just saying, just pointing that out. Fucking probably 20% of my videos, I first find out about the news on Politically Incorrect. It's not even shitposting at that point. But I'm not seeing much mention at all in the legacy media. This is a huge potential case. The Fifth Circuit's ruling effectively is binding, will have to be appealed by the SEC. What they'll do, though, is because they're privileged, because they're in the government, they'll proceed with their unconstitutional actions, barring a SCOTUS decision. Even if there is a SCOTUS decision, they will probably try to find some legal wiggle room and work around to continue violating the right to a speedy and fair and public trial for people that are being persecuted by the executive branch of the government. Effectively what happens, SEC, IRS, the FISA court system, and so forth. It's sort of similar to the no-fly list. Red flag laws, I would lump them in, although those tend to go through normal court systems. It's effectively an attempt to persecute people. Differential enforcement alone has been shown to be a problem here. You have a pervasive culture, I think, especially in the FISA system, of ignoring potential criminal or civil misconduct style behaviors if the person who is engaging in those behaviors has some sort of connections, has enough clout, etc., or has the right political views regardless, because of the structure of a system which is run by a part of the government that's partisan. The SEC is administered by a partisan body politic, by the executive branch. The executive has a political party. The executive has an ideology. The executive has donors and favors to peddle and so forth. And yet we have this system in which the public court system cannot even be resorted to by people that are being sued by the government, often on spurious charges. By the way, this impacts a really important case involving new tech, which is the SEC versus Library, LBRY, and by default Odyssey. They're being sued over the idea that their crypto that's embedded into the system, the LBC, the library coin, that's a securities exchange. And that thus all of those little microtransactions that the site is engaging in are by default taxable, etc. Considering the flow of that internal system, considering the volume, number one, considering the need to use it on site because of the way the site is actually created, it bankrupt them instantly. They've had to spend millions of dollars fighting off the SEC already. The SEC is going after other sites too. It would be a real big help, a huge boon, if the public court system, which is at least less biased generally, were the ones that were actually engaging in judicial behavior in these civil cases, in some cases criminal cases as well, in looking at these issues. Instead of a person who effectively works for a partisan executive branch appointed by the potential plaintiff or defendant doing so. This is a lot bigger of news and has much far wider reaching consequences potentially, regardless of the decision made, broad, narrow, or even in favor of the SEC, than people are giving it credit for. So it's something definitely to keep a close eye on because it has a huge potential ramification for new tech, huge potential ramification, again, regardless of decision, for the very structure of the judiciary body. Will the Supreme Court, if they take the case up, will they decide to reassert supremacy over the legal system, or will they effectively say, no, it's okay, we're effectively ceding potentially limitless, civil at least, judiciary power to a body subjugate to the executive branch as incarnated by the legislative branch? Again, in the United States, there's a premise, basic one, the separation of powers. In my mind, I can see no particular argument whereby the judiciary can be robbed of the right to adjudicate these cases. Let's hope that the Fifth Circuit's decision is upheld at the Supreme Court. That's about all. Peace out.